Naghmeh Abedini, be in prayer for her, her family, and her husband, of course. And be in prayer for our legal team as we're about to go off the air and make some big decisions about what happens next week at the United Nations. We've got a very unique opportunity, and we are going to walk through that as we do here at the ACLJ.
This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about Pastor Saeed Abedini. We've had hearings now at the United Nations. We were able to get successfully into the UN's report a section dealing with Pastor Saeed's arrest and conviction.
And we'll move on to the European Centre for Law and Justice.
The European Centre for Law and Justice would like to thank and congratulate the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion for his report and activities. As the Rapporteur emphasizes it, the primary holders of religious freedom are the individuals. Whereas it is true that the religious minorities need a special recognition and protection as a group. On the other hand, the individuals should not be prisoners of their religious groups. Their individual right and freedom to change religious affiliation, to convert, must be protected, especially for those who leave the majority in order to join a minority religion. It is of a primary importance that the Human Rights Council persistently condemns the so-called anti-apostasy laws. In this regard, the European Centre for Law and Justice would like to bring to your attention again the situation of Saeed Abedini, who is currently jailed in Iran because of his religion. Arrested during his visit to Iran to build a non-sectarian orphanage, Saeed is now imprisoned in Tehran for engaging in peaceful assemblies of Christians in private homes. Also, his official charge was cloaked as a national security concern. Iranian media and his attorney have reported that Saeed was put on trial solely because of his religious activities. Saeed's imprisonment is a clear violation of the rule of law and of his fundamental rights to exercise his religion of choice, in community with others, in public or private, in worship, observance, practice, and teaching, as guaranteed by international law. Saeed peacefully and private and religious gatherings are not a threat to national security, and moreover, General Comment 22 prohibits restricting religious freedom on the basis of national security. Saeed has been repeatedly beaten, denied access to medical care, subjected to intense interrogations, and threatened with death, all because he peacefully exercised his Christian faith. These violations must be addressed so freedom of religion and belief, including the intertwining rights of religious expression and peaceful assembly, are reinforced as a cornerstone upon which peace may be established. The ECLJ recommends that the Human Rights Council condemn every practice that prevents individuals from freely choosing and practicing their religion of choice, and request that Saeed be released immediately. Thank you, Mr. President.
So we were able to get that in a UN report. Why that's significant is that means that now the international community is on notice. We're going to continue, of course, being involved in this case at the highest levels of governments around the world, not just at the UN and the European Union, but also right here in the United States of America as well, and governments literally from coast to coast. And I've activated our offices around the globe, in Moscow, in Jerusalem, in Africa, in Strasbourg, France, even in Pakistan. We are working aggressively for this pastor and to get his release. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255 to sign on to that petition, ACLJ.org, or you call us at 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org, ACLJ.org, or 1-877-989-2255. Back with more in just a moment.
The situation for American pastor Saeed Abedini is getting worse. This U.S. citizen is being beaten, tortured, and subjected to psychological abuse as he serves 8 years in one of Iran's most brutal and deadly prisons. Pastor Saeed is facing a life-threatening prison sentence simply because of his Christian faith. He's no longer permitted to call his wife and 2 young children who live in the U.S. His family does not know when or even if they will ever hear his voice again. The ACLJ continues to work here at home and around the world to secure his freedom. We continue to pressure the U.S. government, the United Nations, and the European Union. But we need to hear from you. There's power in numbers, and that's why your voice is so important. Sign on to our petition now to save Pastor Saeed. Time is critical. Call now 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Jordan had a chance to actually sit down one-on-one with Naghmeh to talk with her about the case, about her husband, about her family, and what's going on now that he's been sentenced to 8 years as we work diligently for his release. Let's take a look.
You know, Naghmeh, one thing that we haven't talked about as much, especially when we did all the interviews, is that this wasn't Saeed's intention. He wasn't someone who intended, we mentioned it briefly, but he was not someone who intended to get in trouble, to send a message, and you weren't waiting here to tell his story to the world as some U.S. versus Iran, that he really just wanted to help people there.
Yes, and some people have questioned why would he go back, and if he broke the law, why would he expect any help? The truth is he didn't break any law. Since 2009, where there was a promise made between him and the Iranian government that he would not pursue the house church movement, he was very careful to walk exactly within the guidelines they gave him, which was no house church activity, and he was there as to pursue a humanitarian effort.
It wasn't as if, I mean, it was, you were reluctant to be like, to think that I'm going to be have to go on TV every day.
We didn't go to media immediately. We waited and waited 5 months after his passport was taken, and we waited 2 months to hopefully work with the Iranian government, and after 2 months that he was under house arrest, he was taken physically. Even after that, which was any person would call media and get the word out immediately, where we didn't know where he was for a week. We waited and waited. Media was our very last straw. What happened, we waited 3 months. We heard continued lies that he would be out, and we tried to work through all the loopholes they provided with the bail, with everything. And after continue waiting 3 months, and we were worried about his health, that's why we were hearing about beatings, we were hearing about other cellmates hurting him. That's when we decided to move forward with media. But it was not at all something we wanted to pursue. Even that was my first Fox interview was my first exposure to media ever.
And the idea that the hope was the entire time, not that it's always, you try to set kind of milestone markers along the way in any kind of strategy. And this is not an easy strategy because it's Iran and it's a difficult situation, but that the hope was that you never had to do this interview right now. You never had to sit down with me here, and that we were doing the work that we did behind the scenes, but it became clear that a conviction was coming, that a trial was going to be done, and that people needed to hear the story back in December so that, months later, we didn't have to retell the story because it got worse. They know what's happening. They get updates every week now, if not multiple times a week. And so in a way, everybody who's watched this now was prepared for this moment to this day, so that they've already heard about Saeed, what happened, how he got into this situation. But the idea that the initial goal was to hope that you never had to tell the story. And
I have to say that there was a lot of work that was being done by ACLJ before the media. There was many different routes with the U.S. government, with diplomatic efforts. Many lawyers involved to get Saeed out even without the media. Yep. And that was our last route. And as anyone going through hardships in their life or some kind of turmoil, you do not want, that's not the time you want to be in front of a camera. No. It's nice to be in front of the camera, like with Hollywood and other things, but when you're at your lowest, when you're at your broken time, when your kids are devastated, you're devastated, it really took a lot for me to say, okay, I'm going to do this for Saeed. You don't want to be exposed during that time. You don't want to be talking to a lot of people. You don't want to, every time you say the story, you're reminded. Every time I would see Saeed's or pictures on the news, it brought back all the memories. And so it took a lot of praying and strength for me to say, I'm doing this. I'm going to fight for my husband. And if this is what it takes to go on media, I'm going to do it. I'm not comfortable with it, but I will do it.
He knew that it was a situation where that may put people at risk, including him, but that it was time for people to know the story. And he knew he had you here to tell it.
And there were some phone calls before we went to media. There were some visitations, and we had to be on the same page. We both said, okay, let's wait. There was beatings. We said, okay, we're still going to wait, hoping they promised him to be out before Christmas, and he wasn't. And the people presenting bail were threatened, and so on. And there was a point we both said, there was a point he said, they're not going to let me out. They're not going to let me out. They want to keep me here for a long time. And I don't know how exactly he knew, but he knew from his conversations with them and the way they were treating him that they weren't going to let him out anytime soon. And this was months before the 8-year conviction. So there was a point where we were both on this agreed to move forward. And he said, I told him, I promised him many times, I said, I will do whatever I can to get you out.
And that's what you see yourselves doing now. I mean, obviously we have the calls, we do the work, you talk to the State Department, you talk to government officials, and you get us information, make sure that we know what you're hearing and from the lawyers there, and that we're all on the same page, as you kind of said you were with Saeed. And then part of that is, I remember one time saying, we don't have to do that interview if it's going to be too much. And you said back, this is my job. This is what I have to. Don't ask me, if I can do it. If it's not someone with my kids, basically, I'm going to be there. The media just saying, we want to talk and tell this story every day. And they really do. Yeah. And if you've got an update, they want to give it out. They want to put it out for you because a lot of people, high up in the government and to just everyday folks who heard the story once on radio or saw it on their friend's Facebook page, they care deeply. And to be able to see you, it makes it very real for them.
They do care. That means a lot to me. There's people in tears coming up and praying, and little kids caring about how Saeed's doing, if he's going to make it, and when he will be out. And it is my job right now. I'm a single mom. Job of getting my husband out, and the job of being there for my kids.
Absolutely. For those of us who do the media side for the ACLJ, and that's not every attorney at the ACLJ, but for those of us who do, I mean, it's more than the 5 minutes people see. And yet, I've done them with you where you've gone back to back to back to back on radio and having to tell that story. And I know that people out there will pray for you, and that's how you get through that. Because it's tough for me. And it's not a family member of mine. I mean, we represent you, and but it's not an easy story to have to keep telling, or have to describe the conditions and then getting us the letter. The letter comes through you.
Yes.
And you have translated, so that everybody watching and listening right now, they're able to read it because of what you do, and then they can imagine what it's like to translate those words.
Well, I'm asking people to do what they can do to get the word out, to bring awareness. Then I feel responsible as well to be the leader in that, and doing what I can to get the word out, to get updates on what's going on inside the country, get the letters translated, and do what I can to get the word out as well, and when I'm asking others to do the same.
So let's talk about your husband's health. What's the latest word you've heard about how he's doing physically? I know psychologically that it's torture what they go through, but also physically as well.
Well, I was made aware of beatings initially, and recently it was confirmed that he has internal bleeding and damages, especially to the stomach area, because of those beatings.
So it's a serious situation for people out there to understand. He's fighting back with everything he's got, spiritually, his prayer, and physically as well, to stay here, to get back to you and get back to his kids.
Yes, and it's getting critical. He's not being treated, and we don't know how long he's going to survive with his medical condition.
From our side, I know why the petitions are important, But I know it's important for you, too, to know that people care and that people support you. And they support Saeed. They're praying for him. And I think, by every signature, we know that's someone who is in prayer for Saeed. We know that they've taken that extra step and that they care about your family and about the Christians in Iran, but specifically what's going through. So to go from 410,000 to 500,000, people may see that as this arbitrary number. I know some of your friends have said, well, you've got a lot of people on this petition already. Why keep pushing people? But every new person, every new it's important. It's important to the efforts to get him home, but also I think for you too, to know that that's another 10,000 people who cared enough to take the time not just to hear about the story, but to do something about it.
Well, a lot of people have asked, it's already reached the 300,000 goal, why should we continue? And as you mentioned, I've had so many people say it's 350,000 now, 370,000 now. For me and those watching, it's amazing. There's one more voice saying, I'm going to take the extra step. I'm with you with that petition. But also, the more the signatures, the better for other uses, for other having the petition presented to other sources as well.
The situation for American pastor Saeed Abedini is getting worse. This U.S. citizen is being beaten, tortured, and subjected to psychological abuse as he serves 8 years in one of Iran's most brutal and deadly prisons. Pastor Saeed is facing a life-threatening prison sentence simply because of his Christian faith. He's no longer permitted to call his wife and 2 young children who live in the U.S. His family does not know when or even if they will ever hear his voice again. The ACLJ continues to work here at home and around the world to secure his freedom. We continue to pressure the U.S. government, the United Nations, and the European Union. But we need to hear from you. There's power in numbers, and that's why your voice is so important. Sign on to our petition now to save Pastor Saeed. Time is critical. Call now 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
Well, I was born in Iran in the late 70s, a few years before the Iranian Revolution, where the king was overthrown and Iran became an Islamic Republic of Iran. It became an Islamic government. And soon after that, after the revolution, there was a war between Iran and Iraq that lasted 8 years, and over 1 million people died. It was about June of 2001 where I felt the Lord, actually before then, even throughout college in the late 90s, I felt the Lord tugging at my heart to go back to the country I was born in Iran, and share. But it was such a scary concept. I've forgotten the language. I felt English was my first language now, and I didn't know the people. It just seemed a scary place to visit. So, but what happened was in 2001 of June, I was 100% sure the Lord wanted me to go back. And so I got, there was just through many confirmations, I bought a plane ticket for October of 2001. And then of course, as I was getting ready to leave, September 11th happened. And everyone said, no, it's getting dangerous there. There might be wars in the Middle East. You don't want to go back. I was a girl in my mid-20s at that time. And they said, don't, change your plane ticket or cancel it. I tried canceling it. I just didn't feel like the Lord wanted me to. So I gave myself another month. So I changed my plane ticket to November, and I felt like the Lord wanted me to go. So I went, I felt like the Lord said, this is the solution. You need to go and share my gospel with these people and love on them. And I had a friend who continually invited me to a building church, but I was afraid it was monitored by the government. It was government approved, so I ignored that building church for a while. But finally in 2002, about a year later, or end of 2002, I went to the church, and that's where I met Saeed. He was one of the worship leaders. I just could see a passion about him and the way he worshiped and loved the Lord. So Saeed became a believer in 2000, and soon after that, he started house churches, underground churches. When I met him In 2000, we married in 2004. It was rapidly growing to a few thousand people, hundreds of house churches all over Iran. We had to, Ahmadinejad became president at that time. Before Ahmadinejad, between 2000 and 2005, there was a more liberal government where they allowed more Christian activity. But in 2005, we realized that with the new president, there was more persecution on the Christians. So we left Iran, and me and my husband, in 2005. And in 2009, we decided to go back, and we felt there should not be a threat. And we went back and were in Iran for a few weeks. When we came back, we were leaving the country, he was arrested by the intelligence police, and he was told as long as he discontinued any house church movement, that they would allow him to freely move back and forth into Iran, see his family, his parents, his siblings, extended family. And as also they suggested, they said, Saeed mentioned saying, I'm a Christian, I will never change that, and I want to help these people. This is the country I was raised in. I want to help. And one of the intelligence police even suggested, why don't you do humanitarian efforts? So when he came back in 2009, we were praying, and we both had a huge heart for the orphans. Having kids ourselves, we just couldn't imagine kids without covering, with being abused on the streets. So that's when we started the orphanage in around late 2009, and we started the building, and the government actually gave us approval, and they allowed us to start the building. They approved most of the board members. Between 2009 and 2012, Saeed traveled into Iran more than 9 times, and nothing. No, he followed all the guidelines he was given by the government. He was, we were almost complete with the orphanage. The building was almost finished, 80% done. We had one more board member to approve. And this last trip, he was there for that as well, when unfortunately he was stopped. His passport was taken as he was leaving to come back to the US, and he was under house arrest for 2 months, from July to September. And in September of 2012, the house was raided, his parents' house that he was staying at in Iran, and he was taken by Revolutionary Guards. We did not expect at all for him to be taken, and I got a frantic phone call the day he was taken by his mom, and said, they took him, they raided our house, we don't know where he is. And so for a whole week we didn't know where he was or if he was even alive. And it was the hardest week of my life, just not knowing where he was. And of course, not being able to talk to him that first week was hard, not being able to pick up the phone, and just, I would pick up the phone to dial his number and realize, oh, I can't do that anymore. And so the first person I called was actually a lawyer at ACLJ. And she had been there since, or the lawyers at ACLJ had been there since his house arrest in July. And so I immediately called and said, this is what's happened. We don't know where he is. I got in touch with the State Department immediately in late July, when they would not let him leave the country. That was the first contact. Someone said call the U.S. government. It was the hardest phone call of my life, because I expected something. And they said, there's nothing we can do. They even said, we're not Hollywood. We can't just go and save people. And they said, there's nothing we can do. We're sorry. If he's broken the law of that land, then he needs to be accountable. And whatever. They said, there's nothing we can do. And I remember I was holding myself from crying on the phone. And I hung up and I just started crying. And I called, again, my lawyer at ACLJ, and told her about it. And but I remember, as I was crumbling, the Lord telling me, who are you trusting? Do you want the government to save him, or do you want me to save him? So it gave me a lot of peace knowing God is still in control. So I needed to hear from the Lord initially, to calm down of why he's there. Your first thoughts go back to what if he hadn't left? What if this? What if that? And the Lord just put on my heart many things, but the main one was that he was connecting me and Saeed separately in a deeper relationship with him, where we're clinging, we're depending on him for every step. And I saw that. I saw myself, especially at a very low point, depression, anxiety, and he took me out of it. And I can't even explain to how connecting to the vine and experiencing him and his goodness has meant. And I also see that in Saeed. So that was the first thing that the Lord put in my heart. I am using this to make you and Saeed a vessel for my gospel and for my glory. So I knew that I just had to let him do what he needed to do to change me in the areas I needed to change. And also I knew that he was changing Saeed for a bigger work. And you know, we've all heard the sermons that you have to go through the fire. That's how it works. But also I felt like the Lord telling me they're silencing Saeed, but I'm going to be a voice for him. They're trying to make him stop. They're afraid of Christianity, people becoming Christians, but this is what's going to happen. What they're afraid of is going to happen. I'm going to use this for my glory. I'm going to use this to bring many, many people, including Muslims, to myself, to know me, because I'm a good and compassionate God. And also, I will use this to unite the church that is so scattered, to unite the body of Christ, to be and bring some kind of a awakening to the body. So it was good getting that vision, a spiritual vision from God, saying, okay, this physically it looks horrible not having him, but spiritually I'm doing things in you and through you, and through Saeed. He's there for people who've gotten death sentences in that prison. They may never ever come out, and he's there to show God's love and bring his salvation. I believe there's a bigger purpose, but what Saeed talks about in his letters is that he can be the light of Christ in that prison, that to the people that might have never heard, and to the guards and to the Revolutionary Guards and to the interrogators who beat him, and he still hugged them, and everyone in prison, everyone involved, he can be a light. And I believe he knows that's his purpose, is he's there for a few people that the Lord has him share with. I do have hope that he will be released. I don't know when, but I do have hope that he will be released. But there's been times where I've had to give that up to God and say, whatever happens, even if his life is taken, I trust that you're a good God and you know what you're doing. But really my hope is that he will come home soon.
The situation for American pastor Saeed Abedini is getting worse. This U.S. citizen is being beaten, tortured, and subjected to psychological abuse as he serves 8 years in one of Iran's most brutal and deadly prisons. Pastor Saeed is facing a life-threatening prison sentence simply because of his Christian faith. He's no longer permitted to call his wife and 2 young children who live in the U.S. His family does not know when or even if they will ever hear his voice again. The ACLJ continues to work here at home and around the world to secure his freedom. We continue to pressure the U.S. government, the United Nations, and the European Union. But we need to hear from you. There's power in numbers, and that's why your voice is so important. Sign on to our petition now to save Pastor Saeed. Time is critical. Call now 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.